Welcome to another edition of Talk Your Exposure. This is season 2, episode 12. I'm alongside my compadre, Devontae Campbell. It's been a while, man. How you doing?
Hey, you said it right there. It's been a while, but it's good to be back. It's good to be back.
For sure, for sure. We have a special guest with us today, former Division I athlete, former Team Canada athlete, radio analyst for TSN, broadcaster for Sportsnet, as well as also NBA TV Canada, Sherman Hamilton. How are you today?
I'm great, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on. How are you guys doing?
We're alive. We can't complain.
Doing great.
Can't complain.
That's right.
We'll get you started off with some quick hitters. So, Devontae, it's all you.
All right, Sherman. We're going to switch it up here today. Before we've been playing this and that, but today we're going to play overrated, underrated. I'm going to give you some I'm going to give you some topics, some names, and you're going to tell me if it's overrated or underrated. All right?
Okay.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right. First one, overseas basketball.
Underrated. It's a great experience on so many levels beyond just playing the game, and you just learn so much about yourself, about other cultures, and team dynamics with the language barriers. It's a great experience. So I think in my experience, I feel like it's underrated. I think more people should experience that if possible.
For sure, I totally agree with you on that one. All right, Michigan's Fab Five.
I think they're underrated. I think for what they did, not only on the court, but what they did socially in terms of, they made a big statement back in a time when teams weren't really saying much that had that kind of platform. And I thought the Fab Five did a great job of really saying what they wanted to say for a lot of people who were voiceless. And they stood by it, and they really were attacked for their stance and how they carried themselves. But I appreciated it. And I think that we look back at that 20, 30 years later and we're saying, you know what? Those guys did something special. And at the time, they weren't appreciated the way that they should have been appreciated.
Okay. All right. Now, on the other side, in the Big West, UNLV's 1990-1991 team with Larry Johnson and all them.
Ooh. Okay, so that's a bit of a touchy situation for me because I really, really liked that team. That was one of those teams that I could relate to because they looked like guys on my block, looked like guys that I grew up with. And, they were kind of that group that nobody really wanted them to beat the Dukes of the world and things like that. So, I'm not going to say overrated. I think they're underrated because I loved everything that they did on the floor and how they played and the personalities and the characters and they could ball too. Like they brought that whole package to the floor and I just enjoyed that time of basketball.
I'm also a big UNLV fan and just in general. But all right, let's switch it up here to players. Gilbert Arenas.
Wow. You don't get the nickname Hibachi from not doing anything. You think about the back in the day, the bad boys, the Detroit Pistons. I don't know if you guys remember that, but Vinnie Johnson came off the bench and they called him the microwave because he got it going in an instant. But when you think about a hibachi, where you can take it anywhere, you can just plug and just put it down and light it up, and it's hot right away. Mm-hmm. When you get that nickname, you're doing some crazy things. And even when you look at the game today, Steph Curry and Damian Lillard, who are shooting it from the logo at center. Mm-hmm. Who started that? Like this guy was doing that way back in the day, dropping 50, but doing it from deep and just doing it to everybody. So that guy was underrated. Now he had some issues off the court. The whole issue with the gun was a problem. But if we're just talking basketball and what he was able to do as a player for that period of time, he was pretty special. So I'm going to say underrated.
And I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to leave it on that. Hibachi's hot. We starting off the show hot. Let's get it going.
I do gotta ask you though. I want to touch up on this because Devontae brought up the Fab Five. Do you think that the Fab Five and NWA had a lot of similarities at the time, just based on how they try to change the culture? Obviously, NWA with music, Fab Five with basketball. Do you think there's a lot of similarities with that one?
I think in terms of trying to message certain things about the culture. Yes. I mean, both cultures were different. I mean, you're talking West Coast with NWA and there's a different vibe and a different culture out there. But I think the messaging was different, in terms of how they delivered their message. NWA, they were no holds barred. Yeah. They told it like they talked it on the streets. And a lot of the world wasn't ready for that, but they were speaking their truth. It was their reality. And it kind of shed a light on what the wrongs were against Black people, especially in the ghetto. So NWA, the language was very, very coarse. It was aggressive. It was angry, but it was truthful. And I think at the end of the day, that's the same thing the Fab Five were doing with better language, more of a cleaner approach. And both NWA and the Fab Five, they were rejected by people. They were, talked about and they were tried to be put on the outskirts and quieted, but neither of them would allow that to happen. So both movements were necessary and both movements had impact.
I agree. I want to transition a little bit right now to the NBA right now. What are your thoughts on the NBA playing during the pandemic?
It's considering all things that are in play, I think the NBA has done a good job of trying to put the best product on the floor. It's just difficult. And we're seeing how much our world is different and how much the things we enjoy, like basketball, can be impacted by COVID. And it's difficult to really compare it to any other basketball that we've seen, right? So we kind of got to take this in an isolated situation and look at it for what it is. There's a pandemic going on. There's a situation where all of the elements outside of the court are very different in terms of how we interact with no fans in the building and, the players' ability to move around and for us in general to be able to consume the sport we love the way we want to.
Right.
So I would say that, it's been pretty good considering all the things that could derail it. And there has been impact from COVID, and we've seen it with the Raptors lately in terms of how many players have missed some time. But I just think, like everybody else, you and I included, we've just got to navigate it. We can't do things the way we normally have done it, and we can't sit there and complain about it all the time. We've got to keep moving and adjust and continue to figure out ways to push that ball up the hill. And I think that's what the NBA has done. And I tip my hat to them because it's not an easy task. And that goes to all the sports leagues, right? It's not easy to put your sport on during a pandemic. I mean, there are a lot of hurdles to go over, but the NBA is doing it. And I'm just happy that they're playing some form of basketball.
I agree. I couldn't say that. I couldn't have said that any better, to be honest with you. I definitely think that the NBA and NCAA right now definitely doing the best that they can. I'm a Duke fan, unfortunately, so they didn't really have much.
Wow, you said that out loud too, huh?
There we go, Sherm. Thank you.
Listen. I don't appreciate that, okay? But no, I'm a Duke fan, so obviously they had their COVID situations as well. I'm also a diehard Raptors fan, so I've been lately the past couple of weeks have been hard for me for that reason because Duke's been out of the tournament and Raptors haven't really been successful right now, so it's been rough. But I'm just curious to know.
Well, I'll say this quickly, Stephen. I'll say this. I went to VCU and we didn't even get a chance to play in the tournament because of COVID. We had positive tests and we had a no contest against Oregon. So, I mean, you think about those kids who last year tournament was shut down for everybody. So that's an opportunity lost. And we know it's such a finite amount of time you're in college. And then this year they get knocked out again because of COVID. Don't even get a chance to play. So that's 2 years in a row VCU gets impacted by COVID. So, and that's my alma mater. So it was difficult to see that, but that's the nature of the times we're living in.
You're right. You're definitely right. I know that you're collaborating right now with the Raptors, but is there any other teams that you're interested in watching right now?
I'm a consumer of basketball, so I just love watching basketball. I really want to see how it shakes out towards the end. I want to see what the Lakers look like at the end of the season. I want to see what the Clippers look like. Milwaukee. Have they answered the questions of being a very good regular season team? Can they get over the hump in the playoffs and be a team that challenges for a championship? Mm-hmm. But I do like some other stories in the league. I like the fact that, when you look at a team like the Knicks, I mean, it's such a major franchise in the NBA. To see them finally start to seem like they're turning the corner, and can they sustain that growth for the rest of the season, potentially get into the playoffs, and then can they turn that into more growth moving forward? And the Raptors, I mean, it's a tough stretch for them right now. Can they dig themselves out of this hole? Can they figure out a way to get into the playoffs if they get into the playoffs, you think about it, as a 7th, 8th seed, let's say if they get in, do you really want to face them in the first round? Like, they could create a lot of issues for anybody in the Eastern Conference and get things going. So it's almost one of those things where there's so many moving parts that the playoffs could be very, very interesting. And then you throw COVID in there, and if a team gets impacted by COVID in the playoffs, that changes everything, right? So I have a lot of interest in this season and how it shakes out.
I'm curious to know, though, what do you think is going on? I'm glad you touched on the Raptors, but like, why are the Raptors not doing well this year? What do you think the biggest impact is? Because obviously before they had that whole COVID stretch, they were right there at 4th or 5th seed. Now, you know, they've lost 9 in a row. They just, you know, they continue. They snapped Houston's losing streak yesterday. You know, and so what do you think has been the factors behind the Raptors' unsuccess right now?
It's been difficult. This season has been really, really interesting when you think about a 2-8 start. Then over the next 21 games, you know, they go 14-7. So that's the stretch you're talking about where they figured some things out and they started to play like the team we know them to be. And then you go into this 9-game losing streak. And it's like, I think the team that was figuring it out during that 14-7 stretch is a team that we know them to be. You know, the team that got after it defensively, a team who offensively just knew how to finish games. They just understood that championship pedigree came into play in the last 2-3 minutes of the game. No panic. They just played basketball and they knew how to get it done. Since this COVID situation has hit, they've really struggled. They've asked certain players to step up and fill the roles of guys that were missing. Great opportunities, but they weren't able to do that with any consistency. And I think now that guys are back, a couple things are in play. Number one, you miss that amount of time. As you guys know, you've got to figure out a way to get your rhythm, to get your cardio back in game shape, you know, get that game flow. The other thing is, you know, guys like Norm Powell, who was playing off the charts when those guys were out of the lineup.
Sorry, but off the charts. He is balling right now.
100%. But the issue now is when those guys come back, Norm can't take 22 shots. Those other guys are going to take some of those shots.
You're right.
So Norm's got to find that balance where he's not going to be the focal point the way he was used to for those stretch of games. And then he's also got to figure out how to acclimate these guys, and these guys have to figure out how to get back with Norm and the team and get their flow. And then the biggest thing to me is, you know, the problem with COVID is we just don't know how it interacts with everybody. There's no consistency. And we don't know if those guys that were impacted by COVID are still having some residual impact, right? Like, we can't tell. They're not going to say that because they don't want to use it as an excuse. But we've heard stories in the NBA of guys like Jason Tatum who said, you know, I got it at the beginning of the year, and then he still was suffering from it months later in terms of just feeling different as a player. Karl Anthony Towns, whose family's been devastated by COVID, and he's talked about how difficult it was for him during that time, and even after, both physically, emotionally, and mentally. So there's a lot of factors that go into this right now for the Raptors that some of it we don't really have a handle on, but what we're seeing now is that this is where this team has to prove that their toughness can overcome anything. Because you've lost 9 in a row, and as you mentioned, you lose to Houston and you snap their 20-game losing streak. It's about time, and you're at that point where your guys have to be your guys and your leaders have to step up and guys around them have to rally, and you got to figure out a way to stop this. The difficulty is the next 3 games aren't easy. You talk about Denver, you talk about Phoenix and Portland coming to Tampa. So it's going to be difficult. And I just think there's so many moving parts to pinpoint one thing and say, this is why the Raptors aren't doing well. I don't think that would do it justice. I think there are a lot of moving things that are happening.
Fair enough.
I think, you know, at the end of the day, you brought up Norm. You know, it all trickles down to Nick Nurse and what he's going to have to do with that group. But, you know, Nick Nurse is a phenomenal coach and probably one of the best coaches in the NBA. You could argue that any day of the week. Although he's one of the best, little throw you off here or change the subject. You know, should Team Canada have a Canadian coach still?
I've never been the guy to exclude anybody from the pool of coaching. I think, you know, ideally it would be great to have a Canadian coach our Canadian team. And there are qualified coaches in Canada that are very good at what they do, that would do a great job at coaching our national team. I think when you talk about the brand of Canada basketball, it's about trying to get as much exposure as possible. And you think about the timing of that and understanding that the influx of NBA players on that Canadian roster has exponentially risen over the years.
Yeah.
And because of, and even not the roster, but the pool of talent, like we're at a point now in Canada where NBA guys will be left off the roster.
You're right.
And when you really try to process that, that speaks to a lot of things. That speaks to the fact that our Canadian feeder systems are developing great players. Mm-hmm. It also speaks to the fact that it's not a one and done or a short cycle. This is going to continue to happen year after year. We're going to see Canadians drafted into the NBA or make an NBA team. And that talent pool continues to grow on the NBA level. So it's a positive problem to have, to not have to be able to cut NBA players from a Canadian national team. So, but when you think about positioning it and having NBA players and exposure and trying to get the height of the Raptors associated with Canada basketball, what better players are to get the head coach who won a championship in his first year, who's as hot as anything in terms of popularity in the coaching ranks. You get that name committed to your program, and he is one of those guys who he's not just an NBA guy. His career started overseas as a coach, so he understands the process and that mentality of grinding it out over there in international basketball as a whole. So he has a lot of respect. He's going to put the work in. He's not going to treat it as this side job. He's going to go in there committed to making the program better. So it was a good marriage. I understand the logic behind it. But I see where people would say, yeah, I want a Canadian coach to represent our country on the sidelines. And at some point that will happen again. But right now we're in a phase where Nick Nurse is the head coach, and he's a great head coach. So I think it's a positive situation all around.
Yeah. And, you know, let's rewind back into 2019. We saw that championship team in 2019 where the Raptors won. You know, how did that impact Canadian basketball, both positively and negatively, if there's any negative?
I'll start with the negative, and it's a very lightweight negative. I don't even know if it's worthwhile saying, but, you know, you think about those people or those kids that got introduced to the game, say around 2013, where the Raptors started to win and started to get to the playoffs and make noise. And, you know, you look at Jurassic Park and all the hype that was around the Raptors at that time, they're spoiled. Because if you were following the Raptors before that, there were some dry seasons, right? There was some losing there that, fans had to endure to get to that point. But you figure if you jumped on at that point, or if you're a young kid that just fell in love with basketball and started watching it 2013-ish, you've seen great basketball from the Raptors. All you know is winning. All you know is deep playoff runs and a championship. All you've seen is the glitz and the glamour of the Raptors. So, you know, every franchise goes through tough times, even after winning. So they could be in for a rude awakening at some point if the Raptors continue to slip. So that would be a negative. And I don't know if it's a negative. I think more the people like me who've been around the losing just kind of hates on them because all they saw was winning, and I had to go through the losing. Yeah. But there's so many positives. I mean, when you talk about the ability to impact not just the city, the province, but the whole country. The whole country was watching that championship. Yeah. And it was represented in the parade. You look at the millions of people that were at the parade, and you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, did we really know basketball had this kind of reach in our country? You know what I mean? And to visualize, because I was at the parade, I saw it for myself. And me being a basketball person my whole life, I look at it and I say, finally, we're getting the respect we deserve as basketball people. But I think that impact is huge because not only does it help to bring people in, it develops a grassroots love of the game. You know, these kids that now we see, you know, are at the point where hockey is not the number one sport at the grassroots level because soccer and basketball have gained so much steam. And that championship is major in terms of catapulting basketball and making younger players or people get involved. And then, you know, when you talk about the casual fan who was, you know, through the years peeking over the fence, looking at this Raptor team from now and then, maybe at a bar or at a friend's house and not really into it. Well, they jumped over the fence in 2019 when the Raptors won, 2 feet in, supporting that team. And since then, they've been following the team. So lots of positives in terms of what that championship has done for the city, the province, and the country. And then, sorry, to add to that, the global scale. The world was watching that NBA Finals. And you think about Toronto and Canada being an international place, all parts of the world enjoyed that win for the Raptors. So from a promotional standpoint, a point of basketball and our country being a basketball country, I think it was huge.
Yep.
For sure. Now, quick question here. Do you think Canada will ever surpass hockey in being its dominant sport?
I don't think so. And maybe not in my lifetime, but I will say this. I don't think that should be the goal, right? I've never thought that one couldn't exist without the other or coexist without the other, or the other one has to be pushed down for the other one to get its just desserts. So, and that's one of the things I felt that the hockey world in our country just didn't want to allow to happen for whatever reason, because hockey was the dominant sport for so long and it had a chokehold on our country. I think they got a bit tentative and a bit irritated with the fact that basketball was growing at the rate it was. And they tried to fight it, and that wasn't a good look. And at the end of the day, I don't see why kids can't play hockey and basketball. And I get it. They play at the same time of the year. So you're ultimately going to have to choose at some point, if you're playing both sports, which one you want to move forward with. But why can't kids grow up playing basketball? Why can't kids grow up playing hockey? Why can't they do both? Play baseball, play soccer, play all these sports, do track and field, be all-around athletes, and then choose when time comes. I just think that hockey is a great sport. Basketball is a great sport. We can live together. We can hang out. We can be good and support each other instead of having to fight each other. And I just think that hockey at this point has kind of succumbed at the grassroots level to the interest, to the affordability of basketball and soccer, and to the ideals of what the game brings. You look at the soccer and you look at basketball, when you look at players on teams, you see a different look than you see on a hockey team. Yeah. And some of that's by design when you think about hockey. So what would I relate to as an immigrant coming to Canada? If I have children and I'm bringing my children to Canada, what are the sports that I want them to be involved in? I want them to be involved in sports where kids look like them. And there's an opportunity for everybody that looks different to have a chance to play together and compete and have fun and develop and grow. I don't know if hockey, from a visual perspective, gives that same opportunity.
It doesn't.
And to be honest, I think the biggest thing that's taking people away from playing both sports is the money aspect. If there's a way that we can kind of figure out a way that we can decrease the hockey fee, because I think somebody was telling me to play hockey is like $4,000 a year or something like that. I don't know the exact amount. I don't play hockey. I'm a basketball player, so $550 compared to $4,000 is a lot, big substantial amount. But I think that's the biggest thing right now that's really not allowing people to play both sports. Unless you have that type of cash flow and type of money to be able to, put into perspective and be able to play both.
No, you're right. And I think, when hockey realized that there was a financial disparity in terms of eliminating certain people, they tried to do some things after being forced, after seeing that the sport wasn't growing at the grassroots level. They developed programs to help out underprivileged kids get involved. But it's late at that point, right? And I think there was an elitism to hockey, especially at the grassroots level, for exclusion, right? And I've always said this. Look, I started out as a hockey player. Loved hockey. Wow. This takes me way back and probably exposes my age, but I wore number 21 in high school and in college, and it was because of my favorite hockey player. It was Boyer Salming, who played for the Leafs. You guys can look him up back in the day, a great defenseman for the Leafs. But that's why I wore number 21. It wasn't because of Dominique Wilkins. It was because of Boyer Salming, a hockey player. And I loved hockey. But I quickly realized, and my family quickly realized, that when I went to the rink to play outside, because we couldn't afford ice time for me to play, and I saw kids wearing hockey gloves, hockey helmets, hockey equipment, and I had my mittens and my hat on, there was a difference in what was happening on the ice. And I quickly realized that I wasn't going to be able to afford hockey. And to some extent back then, it was by design. Yeah. And I tip my hat to the hockey leagues in the GTA, especially, who have designed some programs to help kids that look like me get involved if the opportunity was there, in terms of subsidizing equipment and ice time and things of that nature. But that cash grab and that money that you're talking about that it costs to play hockey is still very restrictive. And I don't think hockey has been able to address that adequately enough. And hence they've lost the grassroots level in terms of being able to cultivate the interest in hockey, because it's financially just not attainable for a lot of families.
Fair enough, and that's very well said. I mean, I couldn't have said it any better, to be honest with you. And by the way, I know you said, we're not going to say your age right now because you don't want to, but I know it's your birthday coming up in a couple weeks. So happy early birthday to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Happy early birthday,
sir.
I know I'm going to go off script right now for a little bit, but I just got a notification on my phone saying that the Nets are trying to get Norman Powell. What do you think that would mean if Norman Powell went to Brooklyn?
I mean, speculation is always a difficult thing for me, and it's something I don't really delve into. I'll just say this. For a deal like that to happen, it depends on what's coming back for the Raptors. They're going to need some help as well if you're giving up a Norm Powell. So, I mean, Brooklyn is a great team. I mean, look at what they're doing without Kevin Durant in the lineup. Yeah. Then you get arguably the best scorer in the league. I mean, it's a fair argument to have. And he's back with Kyrie Irving, who's probably one of the best one-on-one players in the league, and James Harden. Norm's going to have to fit in if he would go into that situation. But there's no question that Brooklyn's on a championship level. And this is a team that's just trying to shore some things up to make sure that they have a bit more depth. And just kind of, the great ones are the great ones, but those pieces around them have to be very good in the moments that they're required to play. So that's what I think Brooklyn's doing. And I tip my hat to a former teammate and friend of mine, Steve Nash, the first-time head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. He's doing a great job. And I just think Brooklyn is on that next level right now. And I mean, you look at the top of the Eastern Conference, it's basically them, Philadelphia, and maybe Milwaukee in that conversation.
Fair enough. Anyway, we'll get back on the script right now. I apologize about that, but I saw that. I was like, you know what? Perfect question to ask right now, because you mentioned Norman Powell earlier. So I do want to transition now to your university career. You mentioned it earlier that you went to VCU. Was there any other teams in the running for you?
Yeah, but not a lot. I mean, first of all, I went to a D2 school first called Florida Tech in Melbourne, Florida. I went there for 1 year, and I had a good year, freshman of the year and all that stuff. But I wanted to play on the D1 level. So, I basically threw that scholarship away with nowhere to go. I didn't tell my mother. I just kind of left the school and disappeared and just kind of figured out a way. And I was helped by a great mentor of mine, and Simeon Mars, who is connected to Jamal McGlure, who went to Kentucky with Jamal McGlure. And he got me connected with VCU, and I went there on a visit. They signed me on the spot. So, in terms of being recruited out of high school, I had a few schools like, the Niagaras, Colorado, Pitt, University of Pitt. I had a ton of Canadian universities that were recruiting me. I even went on a visit to Brandon University in Manitoba. So I wasn't the most highly recruited guy out of high school, but I had enough. You know what I mean? I had enough to choose from. And I ended up, as I said, going to Florida Tech and a D2 school, did well there. Didn't feel I was going to get better, so I left and got a scholarship at VCU. And, it worked out well.
Was there any, other than you wanting to play Division I basketball, was there any other reason why you chose VCU?
Well, I think at that point, you do your research on a school and you see, like it's a mid-major school, and you look at who they have on the roster in the program, and the point guard that was there, when I sat out a year, when I was done sitting out, because I had to sit out my first year because of the transfer rule, he was leaving. So I had a chance to walk into a starting role. And I've never on any level not been a starter. So at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to a mid-major school. And in the conference, it was a good conference at the time. We were in the Colonial, which had schools like Louisville and Tulane and Southern Miss. So it was a real good conference with some really good talent. And, you know, I just did my research and said this would be a good fit for me in terms of playing time, in terms of a year to develop while I'm sitting out and kind of get used to the system, but I get to practice. And I knew that there was going to be an open point guard spot for me to walk into as a starter. So that was the kind of things that really interest me. And talking to my coach at the time, Sonny Smith, he had great plans for me, you know, in terms of, you know, selling me on being this guy for this team, like a headliner. And all college coaches do that, you know, they get a recruit in and they make them seem like they're the world. But he was saying it, but I could see it based on what was happening. And when I got there, and I'm practicing in these scrimmages and not able to play games, and I'm doing what I'm doing against these guys who are a year or two ahead of me, I was very confident that I could have a very successful career there.
Fair enough, fair enough. I do want to ask you, though, what was your first major NCAA moment, whether it's at your D2 or your Division I? What was the moment that you got there and you're like, damn, they're this good, or it's like this, or whatever it was? What was your very first NCAA moment?
For me, my first NCAA moment at Florida Tech it wasn't even on the court. It was when we would play pickup, and you just have people from the school or people from other schools around that would come for the run, and you realize, like, talent is everywhere. You know what I mean? Like in Canada, in Toronto, you have, I don't know, 20 guys who at the time were the men, so to speak, in the city who could play and who was getting all the highlights and all the attention. But there was one of us on every corner in the States, right? Like there's 10 of us on every corner in the States. And that's why the competition level was so high and so good. But you realize, like, in those pickup runs, guys aren't just playing to win. They're playing because this is all they know. This is their life. And when you see that level of commitment to basketball, it heightens you. It makes you say, okay, it's time to take it to that next step, because I have a scholarship. These guys don't have a scholarship, but they're playing like their life depends on it. You know what I mean? And it's like the mentality there is different for a lot of them in terms of how they approach opportunities. So that was then, but I never felt overwhelmed by it. I felt like I could compete with all of them. I wasn't ever afraid of anything that anybody did on the floor. I felt I was better than everybody. And you have to have that mentality, because the guy you're playing against, he feels that way too. Right. So you better be on that level and to match his intensity. And at VCU, you know, for me, the moment that it really woke me up was after my year that I sat out. I ended up blowing my back out and had to have back surgery. And I had to hustle it and get ready in 6 weeks for the season after surgery. It was not the best idea. It was difficult. To be honest with you guys, it wasn't something that was feasible. I shouldn't have been able to do that, but I had to maintain my scholarship. Yeah. So I got back on the floor, and I remember playing Louisville at Freedom Hall, and I was at half court, and I'm being defended by future NBA guys, and I'm just turning the ball over. I can't feel my left leg because my toes are numb from the back surgery. I can't move the way I want to. And these guys are not giving me a break. They are on me because there's blood in the water, right? You know, that mentality. Yeah. They're sharks. They're trying to kill and eat every time they can. Right. And at that moment, I realized nobody cares. Nobody gives a damn about me and what I'm going through. Whatever it is, I just got to figure it out. Yeah. And that was an eye-opening moment for me, because the sympathy wasn't there. There was nobody that was like, okay, let's kind of gradually bring him back. It was like, play, get the job done, help us win no matter what. Mm-hmm. And that mentality, you know, it stays with me till this day. And I'm glad I went through it. It was embarrassing. It was tough to deal with, but it definitely made me stronger.
And I'm glad you kind of touched up on that as well, because I'm just, you know, you kind of said like people didn't really give a damn about you, whatever. But how did your teammates view you being a Canadian basketball player? You know, were you one of those that was like, oh, I'm gonna kill you all the time. I don't really care about you. Like you're a typical Canadian who lives in igloos. You know, it loves drinking.
Soft.
You're soft and all that stuff. But or was it one of those of the mutual respect, knowing your game and knowing how good you were?
Oh no! You're coming and you're taking one of their potential boys' scholarships, so they've got no love for you off the bat.
Yep.
And I knew that going in. I've never been afraid of people like that, especially on the court. So what I knew was getting on the floor was I was going to be tested every step that I took. And I remember we played some pickup games when I first got to VCU. And those runs, no coaches, you know, nobody, no adults are there. It's just the boys playing ball. And there was some times where, you know, you could see people were trying to take it at me. I remember one time the point guard who eventually was going to be gone when I started playing. I'm the type of person, I walk into the gym and I want to know who the best player is at my position. Right. And I find that person, whether it's a tryout or a run, and that's the person I'm checking, and that's the person I want to check me. And I found him and I went after him every single run. And even though I wasn't going to play that year, I got in his stuff because if you're the best player, then I want to see how good you are. You've got to do it to me to prove that you're better than me. And I got into a few scuff ups, you know, those situations where I know that at any moment when I'm talking back to this guy and we're pushing and we're ready to go, that I could be jumped by my whole team because they're going to support the guy that's there, the guy that's American, and not this Canadian kid who they have no clue about, who might be the only black person in Canada by their estimation. So yeah, there were a few dust ups, and you know, you have those moments where you stand your ground and you're ready to deal with whatever happens. And I remember one time that same guy, he thought I fouled him and threw the ball in my face, and I grabbed him and I threw it right back in his face, and I was about 6 feet away, and we were about to go, and I'm seeing the circle around me get smaller. You know? And I'm feeling it. And I'm like, all right, well, you just got to grab one of them and deal with one of them, and hopefully that ends it. But it never ended up getting to that. But you've got to be willing to go there. And especially at that time, it's not you know, now Canadians are everywhere in the NCAA. You know, we've got so many Canadians that are on scholarship that it's the norm now. Nobody's surprised by it. But back then, it wasn't as regular. So, you know, there was some ignorance around Canadian basketball and how good we were. Yeah. And we had to prove it, whether it be in practices and scrimmages and weight room and in the classroom. We just had to continue to prove ourselves. So it was good. I enjoyed it because that's the way I was raised and that's the way I was wired. You fight for what you get, you eat what you kill. And that mentality served me well in the States.
And it's funny because even, you know, you mentioned, you said that not many Canadians had a Division I look, and I think, I don't know too many, but I know at least 10 Canadian guys that had a full Division I scholarship around the time that you were playing Division I, like yourself, Roman Barrett, Steve Nash, Phil Dixon, Gary Durant was there. Like, I don't know everybody. I know Skinny got one as well. I don't know his first name. Devontae knows his first name. But you know, like there's like a very, very, very small amount of people that had that. But I think what really, you know, entails to today's game is the fact that there's a lot more mixtapes, a lot more footage, a lot more media that's being able to cover you know, the games and whatnot, to be able to get the videos out there. How was it like for you to be able to kind of get to that point? Because back when you were playing, video technology wasn't the norm. So what was it like for you to be able to send out a film, or how did you get recruited, or what were ways that you were able to be seen?
Well, a lot of it was word of mouth back then, right? Back then, in terms of film, I'm really going to date myself here, but the old VHS tapes, you know, with the VCRs, you had to like get two of them and kind of record off of each other and cut tape and put a highlight reel together. That was pretty bad when you think about the technology, but it got enough clips of what you could do. But the problem with highlight tapes were it was only the good stuff. You know, coaches needed to see games. They needed to see you play. And in high school, none of the games that I played, I know for sure, were not videotapes.
Wow.
You know, guys like Phil Dixon, I mean, he had like 100 schools after him when he came out of high school at Bathurst. And guys like Bobby Allen, who was a great friend of mine, went to Morningstar, and he had schools coming after him out of high school. But these guys kind of opened up the eyes, and a couple guys before them just started to open up the eyes to U.S. schools that there's a hotbed of talent in this country. And at the time, it was really in the Toronto and the GTA area that they were coming to, and they could see us at all-star games. And you know, you see all the top players in 1 or 2 games, and you get an idea of what you like. But they had to fly to Canada, or guys would go play on quote-unquote AAU circuits back then and go get exposure that way. But that was rare. So the exposure was difficult. And the understanding at the time was that word of mouth through the basketball circles in this country gave you opportunity to get your name put out there, and that would create interest. So coaches would take the opportunity to come and see you. And that's kind of how it went. And for the guys that got scholarships, it wasn't as free giving as it is today, excuse me.
Fair enough.
It was a handful, as you kind of mentioned, and a core group that were getting all the looks. And the scholarships were starting to become more and more available as guys went over there and had success. Mm-hmm. You know, the Canadians that were going over there weren't sitting on the bench. They were playing significant minutes, starting, helping U.S. colleges win games. Mm-hmm. And that really opened the eyes to a lot of the schools in the States. Yeah. And then the advent of social media has changed the game, right? Like, there's so much that can be done via social media in terms of recruiting that it's just a different ball game. And credit the young people for taking advantage of the platform, and credit the schools for using that as a recruitment tool as well. But back then it was difficult. Scholarships weren't given out as frequently, but the ones that got them, you know, you got them and you had to make something happen with them in order to kind of push this thing along for Canadian players, as well as develop your own career.
And in right now, March Madness and everything, you touched up on it earlier, or we touched up on it earlier about the Madness in general. Did you get to have your March Madness moment while you were playing Division I, or did you guys not make the tournament?
Yeah, we made the tournament in '96. We were a 12 seed, played against Mississippi State. Really had a chance to win the game. But it was one of the first experiences that I had where everything you did at March Madness was in front of a camera. You know, everything was recorded. You're getting police escorts to the arena. You know, I'm playing in an arena that seats 70,000. It was absolutely amazing. But you realize in the tournament, as opposed, because you watch it for years and then you get in it and you realize how much and how big it is. Like, we watch it on TV and the glitz and the glamour and the one shining moment and, you know, all the hype around it and the production. But when you get in it and you see what the machine really is, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. And that experience was off the charts for me. It was one of those, you know, when you talk about those points in your career that you look back and you say, well, that was amazing. And that was one of those moments for me. March Madness was definitely one of those moments for me.
Fair enough.
Great. So, you know, after college, you get to play with the Canadian national team. You know, what did playing for your home country mean to you?
It was amazing. And I was playing for Canada while I was in school. So, you know, getting the summers with the national team and then playing at school was great for me. But it's one of those things where, you know, at 15, I'm targeted with the OBA programs and I'm invited to camps. And, you know, you're kind of one of those players that they're watching and they're inviting back and they're saying, hey, there's potential there to get to the next level every time. And when I started in the OBA programs, it was never, I want to play for my Canadian national team. I didn't even know about a Canadian national team. Right. I didn't know anybody who played for Canada at that time. I just playing basketball, and it was another opportunity. It was, you know, a chance to get potential opportunities to travel. That's what it was about. And then, you know, the opportunity comes where you're playing for the junior national team, and then, you know, you're talking to the head coach of the national team and you're having these conversations and you're realizing, oh, they're interested in me potentially playing for this Canadian national team. I better find out what it's about and understand. And then you realize how big it is. It's an amazing opportunity. And, you know, there's so much pride in representing your country. And, you know, you never really understand the enormity of it until you get to something like the Olympics and you realize how much people are supporting you and how much people have tried to get to this point in their careers and haven't been able to reach there. So there's a lot of humility that went into it. There's a lot of humbleness. Sure. And I'm very, unbelievably proud to be able to represent my country. The amount of times I've been able to put that jersey on and go play and do what I can to push our Canadian basketball future forward.
We had Jerome Robinson on the show the other day, who was a former teammate of yours. We spoke a bit about Steve Nash and his work ethic. What was Steve able to teach you about being a pro?
Well, first of all, Jerome, he grew up in the same area as me, went to the same high school as me. And, the guy I mentioned, Bobby Allen, grew up in the same area. So it's kind of interesting. There's 3 generations of us. Bobby was on the national team with me, which was great because he was a mentor of mine and a guy who I watched. And then Jerome, who went to my high school, I played with him. So it was great to see another generation of a guy from Malton and went to Westwood who could take the program to the next level. But Steve was interesting because you got to understand, Steve and I were always competing for the same spot. Mm-hmm. So he was 16. He was a couple years younger than me when I met him. I was 18, and we were always at tryouts together. And he was the guy from out west that was always coming in and going hard. And I was a guy from the city area that was going at him hard. And we had a lot of battles. And remember, I'm not looking at him like Steve Nash. I'm looking at him like, this dude's trying to take my spot. Forget that. We're not having that. Yeah. So we had a lot of battles. And, when we get to the national team and Steve has turned into this amazing basketball player. And I remember one time the coach, Steve Konchowski at the time, said, all right, look, Sherman, we want you on the team. We got this guy Steve was our point guard, our starting point guard. And I said to him, I said, listen, I don't want to play for this team if I don't have a chance to compete for the starting spot. And he said, he kind of looked at me and he was like, yeah, okay. Because they knew Steve was the guy. But I was like, I've known this guy for years. I'm thinking that I don't care what he's accomplished. Yeah. I need a chance to compete for a starting spot. I need to compete for that starting point guard position. I was overreaching, but that was my mentality.
I like it. That's how it had to be.
That's how I was wired. I was never taught to believe anyone was better. I was taught to compete for everything and show me that you can beat me. So I said that to the coach. He's like, fine, we'll compete, whatever. They knew Steve was a starter. So I ended up being a backup to Steve. And, it was great because we battled in practice. He got me better. There's no doubt he got me better. I mean, I learned a lot from him, and I can only hope that he felt that I competed hard enough to allow him to get better as well. But, in what I've learned from Steve and playing against him, and more importantly with him, because after a year or so, I ended up starting on the national team with him because we just played well together. 2 point guards who can handle the ball, who could defend and pass the ball. And he was a lead guard, so he got a chance to play off the ball when I handled the ball. There was just a lot of good synergy there between him and I on the starting unit. But what I learned from him is I've never seen a guy work harder than him. I've never seen a basketball player put what he put into getting to where he is or where he was in the NBA. So when Steve is a 2-time MVP and everyone's saying, how can this guy be an MVP when people like Kobe and Shaq are in the league? I get it. I completely get it. We're not saying Steve is better than Kobe or Shaq. What I'm saying is that guy works hard, and the fact that he's achieving things does not surprise me. He's earned it. And this is the guy who was there before practice, working on his body, doing his drills, the guy who was there after practice, getting his shots up, doing his stuff. And it was like clockwork, consistency. There was a professionalism to his approach. And he had obstacles, he had a bad back the whole time, and he had to navigate that and really take care of his body. But his commitment to detail and how tough he was. And Steve was the guy that, summers when we'd have breaks from the national team or the junior national team, and there were city tournaments, city tournaments, black tournaments, where there might be 2 or 3 white people in the gym, and that's no exaggeration. And we're playing in places like Jungle, which is, the Bathurst and Lawrence area where Bathurst Heights is. Yeah. I mean, these are tough areas, and Steve's in there. Steve's in there playing and doing his thing. You know what I mean? So he's just got this toughness about him and this relentless work ethic. And I'm proud of what he's accomplished, and I'm proud to call him a teammate and a friend. And to see him now, as I said, on the bench coaching the Brooklyn Nets just makes me even happier for him.
Now, they say that Vince changed the way basketball was played in Canada, but do you think we should give it to Nash?
Who changed the way? Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
They say Vince Carter changed
Vince.
the way basketball was played in Canada, but do you think we should give it to Nash? Is what I'm asking.
Well, I think there's 2 levels happening there. What Vince did was put basketball on the map in the NBA. And in doing so, what he did was he excited a lot of kids because he was a highlight reel. Vince was the guy who, when you watched NBA action, if you looked at the top 10 plays of the week, Vince could be anywhere from 2 to 4 of the top 10 plays, right? Because he was that exciting, and a lot of eyes were on basketball. And, the kids that grew up watching Vince were looking at this guy and saying, wait a second, he's not like thousands of miles away. He's downtown.
Yep.
We can go see this guy play, because the NBA is now in Canada, where my generation and before me, we didn't see the NBA in Canada like that. Well, these kids could go down to at the time, the Sky Dome, and they could go watch Vince play, or the Air Canada Center and watch Vince play. And that's a different reality. The repetition of being able to see it on TV all the time, knowing it's right in your city, maybe go to an event and meet Vince Carter, you know what I mean? Or see him talk at a basketball camp or go to his camps. That's a different reality, and it opens the mind up to the possibilities, right? And kids really gravitated towards Vince and the platform that he presented for basketball in Canada. I think what Steve did was Steve normalized it. So Steve was a guy who wasn't 6'6", wasn't this guy who was jumping out of the gym, wasn't the guy who was dunking on people. But Steve was so fundamentally sound, and he was an average sized guy, and he had to work for everything because he wasn't the quickest player. So he had to be efficient. And when you looked at Steve, I think a lot of people said, you know what? He normalized it. He makes it seem like I could do this because I'm 6 foot, I'm 6'2", I'm not 6'7", but he shoots the ball so well. He passes the ball so well. These are things that I can do if I work on my game. And then to see his progression. Remember, Steve was in the NBA for a while before he became this all-star player and this MVP guy. Yeah. So they saw a guy get to the league, then they saw a guy grind, get better and better and better, eventually to get to the top of the league in the MVP count. So Steve realized it. Steve gave the idea that it wasn't an American in Canada who was uberly athletic that was presenting the game to us. It was a Canadian going to the States and dominating in the States in the best league in the world. And guess what? He's a normal sized dude. So that changed the game for, a lot of the smaller players in our country. And then it just reinforced that success wasn't determined by where you're from. You didn't have to be American. You didn't have to be a guy who assimilated into American culture. You could be a true Canadian, and you could go out there and be yourself and just ball out with the best of them. And to me, to see Steve matched up with Vince, Steve matched up with Kobe, with Shaq, you see Steve playing against these guys, and you realize he was raised in Victoria. He was a Canadian. Yeah. I think that really normalized making it to the NBA for the average Canadian player.
Well said as well. But, let's get to our last transition here,
Okay.
Your careers analysis, because we have to know, how did you get to NBA TV and Sportsnet?
Well, I tell people all the time when they ask me to talk to people in journalism, kids that are coming up, I'm not the person. Like, I got a degree in psychology. That was my goal. I wanted to get my master's in psychology. I wanted to open up my own practice and really specialize in child psychology. So that was my game plan going on scholarship to get that degree. I understood I needed a backup plan. And I was playing overseas and I ended up breaking my ankle 2 weeks before I was supposed to head back overseas. So I couldn't go to that job. So I was in Canada and I realized my ankle was pretty bad. Didn't think it was broken at the time, but I was trying to rehab it and realized it wasn't getting better. So I had to find something to do. And I was in Canada and I was hanging around, and the NBA season started, and I got asked to come down to watch some Raptor games. And I went down and they asked me to come on for a halftime interview. I was still playing for the national team at the time. So just coming off the Olympics as well a few years earlier. So, 2002 World Championships. So I had a name, but I wasn't really known. So I did the interview, and the producer at the time said, come by the studio and just hang out for a bit. So I came by the studio, watched some stuff, some pre-game shows, some post-game shows, watched the games. And I didn't know that when I was watching the games with the producers and the other guys like Leo and Paul Jones and, these guys, Jack Armstrong, all these guys that were working at the time, that the producer was basically interviewing me. So after about a week and a half, we're hanging out, talking ball. I'm watching these shows, how they're done. And the producer in about a week and a half, 2 weeks was like, did you bring a suit today? I was like, no. Like, bring a suit next time. It's like, okay. So I wore a suit to the next time I was coming. And he's like, all right, we're going to put you on. And I was like, you sure? He's like, yeah, we're going to put you on. So I got put on air, and that was 19 years ago. And that's how it started for me. It was basically just going in there and watching and talking ball, and they realized I knew what I was talking about, told me to bring a suit, and I brought a suit, and they haven't been able to kick me off since.
Just like that, bread and butter.
Just like that.
Okay, and who's the first person that you did an interview with or spoke with?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. It would have to be a Raptor player. I'm trying to figure out who it would be at the time. I don't know, because at that time, I wasn't really doing interviews, but it's got to be a Raptor player. And I was probably so bad at the interview, at my first interview, that I wanted to forget it. And that's why I've forgotten it.
Lord.
Yeah, but I don't remember. But I mean, I've interviewed pretty much all the Raptors from 2003. You know what I mean? At some point or another, I've been interacting with them. So, but the best part about the interviews are the conversations after, or before, the preambles, because that's when, because when the lights come on, players tend to put it on. But, you get to know players and you understand that there's a lot going on with them, outside of basketball. And when you can connect to that, that's when you have the best conversations or interviews with them, And what I've realized is players are just like us, you know what I mean? They want to know that you're not going to screw them over. They want to know that you're going to be straight with them. You're not going to do anything to put them in a bad light. And I think I've done a fairly good job of instilling that kind of confidence with the consistency of what I do.
For sure. And I appreciate that answer, because I definitely attest to that one. Now, this is the end of the show, and at the end of the show, Sherman, we always love to conclude with a game we called In a Perfect World. Now, I'm very interested to see yours, because you've already kind of answered some of these questions throughout the conversation here today.
I'm still not happy that you're not a Duke fan. But hey,
let him. Don't give no bias. All right, so I'm gonna give you a scenario, Sherman, and then you're just gonna fill it out, kind of like fill in the blanks.
Okay.
Right? So let's, in your instance, let's put being an analysis to the side. You're at VCU. You do what you have to do in 3 years in terms of basketball, that you're in the conversations of being a lottery pick. Again, in a perfect world, right? As how the draft goes, you don't get to pick where you want to go, but depending on the interviews and how you play, you can kind of dictate what teams you want to go to. With that being said, Sherm, you have that luxury during the draft. Draft night comes. Which team are you getting drafted to in a perfect world?
And you can't say the Raptors.
When I was coming out or now?
Great question. In this case, we're gonna say now.
Okay.
And you can't say the Raptors. You can't say the Raptors.
You can't say the Raptors. You're right.
You can't say the Raptors. Okay.
You're right.
I was gonna say. Well, let me just start by saying I was gonna say the Raptors because they have what I feel is the best developmental program.
Yes,
so as a young player coming in, I think it's a great situation to come to in terms of their G League development and how they kind of work people into becoming successful players, as we've seen through many Raptors. So that would be, if that was on the table, it would be the Raptors. I think outside of that, I'd want to go to a situation that's winning, a situation that has a great culture, and a situation that develops. And I think before the Raptors, it was San Antonio, a team that constantly got good players late in the first round, maybe second round, or free agent pickups that they were able to develop and turn into very good basketball players, championship level basketball players. So I think that would be a franchise that I would be interested in because I think Pop's a great coach as well. And I like that disciplined approach, that consistency in terms of messaging and the no nonsense. They're not into the frills in San Antonio. They're about winning. Yeah. They're about doing it the way that they've had success. And you can't argue that. So that would, and I'm more of a low key, quiet demeanor type of guy. And I think that franchise is kind of how I am. They're not the frills. They're not the franchise that's going to be in the news for the wrong things. They're going to go out there. They're going to compete. They're going to play hard, and you're going to win games. So I like that San Antonio franchise.
For sure. Now, you are done your rookie contract. You've got, let's say you've been the first team. We're not going to give you rookie of the year, right? But you've been first team.
That ain't right.
That's too much. That's too much. That's too easy. That's too easy. We're going to give you We're going to give you first team. You're a solidified player in the NBA. You know, your first 4 years. Your contract is over. Now you have the luxury of having the tax and the salary on San Antonio to get a superstar on your team. But with that being said, you get a chance to pick one guy that's been solidified in the NBA, all-star, a vet, but you also get to pick a guy that's his first 2 years in the NBA to try and convince to come over to San Antonio. You're done your rookie contract. You want to get guys over. It's championship time. Who is that vet you're picking? Who's that first 2 years guys you're picking to come over to San Antonio with you?
Sorry, I just want to interject one more time as well. And also, who's 2 Hall of Famers you'd add to that as well?
Okay. So I can pick of any of the elite players in the NBA?
One elite player, a vet, and one first or second year guy in the NBA.
And 2 Hall of Famers.
Okay. Well, I'm picking LeBron. I'm taking LeBron.
Said that. Okay. He said that.
Yeah. I'm taking LeBron. There's no question about it. LeBron is that dude, man. I don't care what you say. LeBron is that dude. He brings winning wherever he goes.
I don't like you very much. You're not a Duke fan. You like LeBron. I don't like you.
Well, at least you know. Hey, Steven, at least you know that at the end of the day, LeBron said if he went to college, he would have went to Duke, right? He would have played for Coach K, right?
He did.
So there you go. There's your connection. Move with that. In terms of first or second year player, you said?
Yep. Rookie or sophomore?
Rookie or sophomore player.
There's a lot of good ones.
You know what? I really, really enjoy LaMelo Ball. I really like his energy on the floor. I think he's better than people thought he would be.
For sure.
I like his pass-first mentality. He plays with great flow to the game. It's unfortunate that he got that wrist injury and now is out for a while. But he's a player I really like. But I look at Anthony Edwards in Minnesota, and I'm like, I'd love to be throwing the ball at the top of the backboard and watching him go and bite the rim every time and dunk it. Yeah. But I like those two guys. And then what was the other one?
Now, Steven, you're saying 2 Hall of Famers that add up to the lineup?
2 Hall of Famers that come out of retirement. You know, they already hit the Hall of Fame. And in a perfect world, right? In a perfect world, right. They come out of retirement, dead or alive. 2 Hall of Famers that you want to add on to that roster as well.
Well. First of all, I'm taking Mike. I'm taking Michael Jordan. All bets are off. I'm taking Mike. Now, for me, if I have LeBron and I have Mike,
yeah,
I feel like with the era in basketball that we play today, and it's small ball, give me Kobe. You're not going to score on us.
God damn.
Yeah, you're not going to score on us, and we are going to destroy you on the other end. There's nobody that can guard all three of those guys.
That's firepower
Nobody.
on firepower.
Yeah. Well, there's nobody that's going to be able to defend us, and we're going to be able to stop everybody. I don't care how big you are. We got LeBron at 6'8", 260 pounds, who will bang with bigger bodies. Yep. Mike is going to get into people's stuff. Kobe is a monster on the floor. I don't know how we lose. They can all shoot. They can all pass. They can all score on the block. They can all score from the mid-range. They can all defend. Can you say a dynasty?
I'm giving you guys a 6-peat. Not you got to break your records.
Oh man, if Jordan didn't go away in that year and a half in the middle of the 90s, it would have been more than a 6-piece, right? And I'm putting more weapons around him. It's more than a 6-piece with Jordan and Kobe and LeBron. And all I have to do, literally, all I have to do is just be breathing.
That's
it.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
I'm not. LaMelo's going to come up. He's going to be doing what he does. LeBron, Kobe, and Mike are going to be dominating. I just need to breathe.
Yeah.
That's it.
Fair enough.
That's very fair. Last question, Sherm. Besides LaMelo, as you've already mentioned, who are some other players in the NBA that you're just watching right now and they're just excited? You're going to put on TNT. You're going to put on Sportsnet. You're just going to watch them for the night. I'm excited to watch them.
Well, obviously the high-level players like the Steph Currys of the world, the Kevin Durant's, the Kyries, the James, the LeBrons, AD, all these guys. But, I love watching Damian Lillard. I think the kid is special. When Klay Thompson's healthy, he's fun to watch. Yeah. I like CJ McCollum. When I go across the league and I think about, young players, younger vets like Karl Anthony Towns. I think he's got great energy. I like the way he plays and the fire that he plays with every night. Jimmy Butler, his roughness, his ruggedness, Bam Adebayo. I mean, there's so many players that I would pay to see in this league, that if I'm traveling and I'm saying, okay, I want to watch a basketball game, there are a lot of players that I put my money down and say, I'm paying to go watch this guy play tonight. Yeah. Because the talent is off the charts. And I can go on and on and on. Joel Embiid, I mean, he's special. Ben Simmons. Yeah. There's some amazing players in this league. So Giannis, it's off the charts. There's too many names to mention that I would go see play and that I would enjoy. I mean, if I was a person who was just a sports junkie and who had ample opportunity to just travel to different cities and just watch sporting events, I could see every city me going and saying, I want to see this guy this night. I want to see this guy this night. And just watching basketball every single night that I could.
Fair enough. I just want to ask you, I know you mentioned Joel Embiid a couple of times today, but would you compare Joel Embiid to Hakeem Olajuwon?
No, not at all. Not at all. Joel Embiid is special. He's unique. I mean, his mobility at his size and his skill set is it's dangerous. Yeah. That guy who can handle the ball, who can Euro step in transition, who can step back and hit a three, who can also go on the block. It's kind of freaky the way that he operates.
Right.
My question with Joel Embiid is until this season was being motivated consistently to dominate. This season, he's done it. I tip my hat to the work ethic and the fact that he's played at the level he's played at. Unfortunately, he's injured as well, but he's having an MVP season. But you got to understand, Hakeem Olajuwon was a nightmare. Forget a dream. He was a nightmare. Mm-hmm. People couldn't defend him. His footwork was immaculate. Yeah. He's a soccer player, remember? So growing up playing soccer and then growing to his height, his footwork was way ahead of the game. And then he had a killer instinct. Yeah. Hakeem wanted to win. He was rugged. He was physical. He was finesse. He could shoot the ball. You couldn't stop him on the block. If you didn't send that second body at him, it was a bucket for sure. And then when Akeem believed in passing the ball and moving the ball, that's when they won championships, right? Back to back. So I just think that they're two different animals, both extremely special players. But the proof is in Akeem and what he's been able to accomplish. It resulted in championships. We know how great he was. Sure. We don't know where Joel Embiid's ceiling is and if it will result in championships or what level he'll end at. But from a talent perspective, Joel Embiid is a monster.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We always ask our guests this last question to end off the show. Who is somebody that you like to see on Talk Your Exposure? But here's the kicker, though. You have to help us get him on the show.
First of all, I don't know who you've had on the show. So
we've had Mike George, we've had Vlad Matevsky,
another
Malton guy. We've had Jerome Robinson, we've had Maurice Ager, Eddie Robinson, Jack Armstrong. We've had Brad. We've had Melvin Edgin. We had I don't even know who else. Oh, Dwayne Notice. I don't even know who everybody that we've had, to be honest with you. But
that's a good list.
Hit all the cylinders.
Yeah, that's a good list right there. That's a lot of high quality people and basketball people for sure.
Yes.
Who would I say?
We've also had Elvis Dennis. I know you're familiar with Elvis Dennis, so we've had.
I know Elvis went to Sheridan College, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, he did.
Yeah. Another good basketball person. Yeah,
Hall of Fame.
For sure. Who would I add to that list? That's a great list. I have to admit, that's a lot of quality people there.
Thank you.
Maybe a Leo Routins, someone like that. A guy who's pretty big in terms of Canada basketball, an NBA draft pick, in his day. Mm-hmm. Really revolutionized basketball for a big guy in Canada at 6'7", 6'8", And he has great stories. He's been around the Raptors since day one. I mean, he's played extensively overseas, and his broadcasting career has been fun to watch. So maybe he's a guy you could add to the list.
Okay, sounds good. Honestly, if you can help us get connected with him, then that would be great. And definitely would love to hear his story and love to hear what he has to say for Canadian basketball as well. I definitely would appreciate that. Hey, Sherman, where can we find you on social media?
At Sherman Hamilton on Twitter and Sherman Hamilton on Instagram. And I will just confess this right now. I'm terrible on social media. I don't really use it much. It's not really my thing, but the odd time that I'm on there, that's where you can find me.
I just followed you on there yesterday, so hopefully I'll be able to get that follow back. But but anyways, honestly, Sherman, it was a pleasure to hear your story. Pleasure to hear from you. A lot of good stories, even though you don't like Duke, and I'm still going to hold that against you for the longest time. But it was a great story. Great to be able to talk to you. And wish you nothing but success and nothing but safety down the line. So stay safe to you and your family, and we hope to hear from you down the line.
Thanks a lot, guys. Great job. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on, and keep doing what you're doing, my friend.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. See you. Take care.